Hi, everyone. Welcome to our session. Oops. I am not the moderator. I'm not one of the presenter, but it seems like the moderator was not here, so we're taking roles in our hands. So I will welcome our first presenter. Sorry, I didn't get your name. Darian. Welcome, Darian.
I will. It's in my presentation. I got this.
There you go.
Thank you.
Good job.
It's kind of a weird setup here. Bonjour, Anin. The spirits know me as Thunder Deer Woman from the Bear Clan. My English name is Darian Pont. I am here today representing the Brandon Neighbourhood Renewal Corporation's Action Research on Chronic Homelessness project, funded by Housing, Infrastructure and Communities Canada. The intention of ARCH is to conduct action-based research by piloting innovative solutions to identified problems. Currently, there are ARCH projects being conducted throughout the country. Each of these projects has selected a different topic to research. Our project is based out of Brandon, Manitoba, and is focused on Indigenous migration from rural and remote communities into homelessness. My role with Brandon's ARCH project is an Indigenous knowledge gatherer. Brandon's ARCH project launched in November of 2023. Prior to commencing our research, we wanted to ensure that we performed our research in a culturally rooted manner. It was crucial to us as a research team to gather information in a trauma-informed way. It was also important to us to showcase the lives that people lived prior to being unhoused. We wanted to humanize our friends and showcase that those experiencing living unhoused are so much more than just their circumstance. Above all, we wanted our friends living on the streets to have an opportunity to speak their minds about what we could be doing better or what we could be doing differently to make sure that we are meeting the needs of those who require support the most. We wanted to build a platform for our often ignored friends to have their voices be heard and their ideas respected. A week after our project launched, we attended the CAEH conference in Halifax in November of 2023. We knew how we wanted to conduct our research, but we sought guidance from knowledge keepers and elders that were in attendance. One of the most impactful pieces of advice that we received was to be clear with our intentions. This became one of our guiding principles that we continue to follow during our research. Upon our return, we sat down as a team and we started to discuss how we wanted to proceed with our project. Our research team knew that if we wanted to gather information, all we had to do was ask. Majority of our team had worked frontline in Brandon and had very good relationships with people that were living unhoused. This has been a critical component of the success of our research project. Our friends were familiar with us and they felt safe speaking to us. Collecting the information was not going to be problematic for us, but we had to be thoughtful in our approach. We were determined to conduct our research with the fundamental understanding that our friends living unhoused were knowledge keepers in their own right. Their knowledge should warrant the same respect and care as the knowledge that we looked for in Halifax. We decided to conduct interviews with people who have moved to Brandon from rural or remote communities to ask them about their journey into being unhoused. We knew that these interviews had to be conducted with care and with compassion. We were asking people to share traumatic parts of their lives with us. Their stories had to be handled gently and respectfully. We created a list of questions to use during the interviews to help guide us during the conversations, to get a firm understanding of every individual's unique journey. These questions' purpose was to act as a guide in case the conversations had stalled. We made efforts to ensure that these interviews felt more like a conversation as opposed to an interrogation. We wanted participants to be able to share their stories without being bombarded with questions. Our participants' comfort level during these interviews was paramount. Before the interviews commenced, we were uncertain of whether we wanted to video document each story or simply audio record. We decided that audio recording would help participants feel more comfortable, and it would also protect their anonymity if that is what they desired. We made sure to inform people that the stories would be audio recorded. Now, traditionally, if you wanted to meet with a knowledge keeper and seek information or guidance, you would offer them a gift and tobacco. We compiled care packages to offer people that were willing to speak with us. There's a large array of items on this table that we handed out. These care packages contained practical items like art supplies, hand warmers, toques, lined gloves, socks, underwear, snacks, and drinks. We wanted to have supplies that people frequently asked for at the shelter, but were unable to receive due to a lack of available donations. We also had activities on hand for people to use during the interviews, such as coloring books and puzzles, so that our relatives could self-soothe if portions of the interview became too difficult. We had smudging supplies on hand and offered people smudge if they wanted. We also offered them tobacco in the form of cigarettes and an honorarium in exchange for their time and their wisdom. We also took care to create a very simple consent form that was easy for folks to understand. We knew that literacy could be an issue amongst participants. We reviewed the consent form verbally, line by line, with every participant. On the consent form, participants had autonomy over their stories. They had the option of having their name be attached to their story. They could choose to use an alias that they were comfortable with, or they could choose to remain anonymous. This ensured that everybody had control over how their individual story would be shared. People also had the option of changing their mind. If they had originally chosen to have their name attached, they had the choice of coming back to see us to change their choice to be anonymous. If they decided that they no longer wanted us to have their story, they could come back to see us, and all copies, physical or digital, would be destroyed. Prior to the start of every interview, we explained our intentions to our friends living unhoused. We explained that Arch is conducting action-based research to get a further understanding of people's journeys into homelessness. We explained that we would also be asking about their ideas of what can be done to help people that are experiencing living unhoused. Our friends were very eager to share their stories, their ideas, and their perspectives. Some shared fond stories of childhood spent with Kookums and Coochies. Many spoke about their lives growing up in the care of child and family services and being shuffled through countless unsafe foster homes or spending their youth years incarcerated. Others spoke about numerous traumatic events that resulted in substance use. Many talked about their education and their careers prior to living unhoused. Most importantly, they shared stories of strength and resilience. Several of our participants brought forward similar ideas of what they thought would be beneficial in our community. These ideas were critical for the next stage of our Arch project, as we would use them as the foundation for implementing new pilot projects in Brandon. In total, between November of 2023 and February of 2024, we had interviewed 102 of our relatives. After we had finished our initial knowledge gathering, our next step was to decide how to publish our findings. Instead of compiling a research paper or a report that would sit on a shelf, we decided to conduct an Indigenous storytelling event titled Street Stories. We wanted to highlight themes most commonly brought forward by our friends that contributed to their houselessness. We also wanted this event to demonstrate that our friends are people first, not just their circumstance. Initially, we thought about playing the audio recordings of the interviews at the event. However, due to the audio quality and identifiable voices, we opted not to do this in order to protect the anonymity of our participants. Instead, we opted to read the stories at the event, introducing each person's story by name or as anonymous if that is what they had chosen. The audio quality of the interviews created a lot of barriers with the transcription programs, and the transcriptions were extremely inaccurate. We spent weeks transcribing the interviews by hand to ensure the stories were precise. We began organizing street stories and compiling the stories that we would share. Due to time constraints, not everybody's story could be shared. We also had to consider who would be in attendance. We advertised a small contest amongst our talented Indigenous unhoused artists, and we asked them to create imagery for invitations, and we offered a gift card to the winner. We used the imagery and got a graphic designer to create invitations. We hand wrote hundreds of invitations to ministers, MLAs, executive directors, healthcare providers, business owners, and agencies across the social service and justice sectors in Southwest Manitoba. These invitations contained a non-traditional feather and a bag of locally sourced Indigenous tea. We passed an offering of tobacco to a local drum group and powwow dancers, and we asked them to bring healing with their gifts in between stories. We contacted the Brandon Friendship Center and asked them to prepare stew and bannock for a feast prior to the start of street stories so that our friends wouldn't be hungry. We reached out to people that we interviewed to see if they would be interested in reading stories at the event. We gathered traditional supplies to create tobacco ties to offer our appreciation to attendees at street stories. These tobacco ties were offered by young men with cultural knowledge in our community. We also made sure to have a quiet room and a smudging room in case any attendees were triggered by stories. We arranged an art show in the foyer of the event hall. We had purchased artwork, crafts, and beaded jewelry from talented street artists. We displayed these pieces in the foyer with their names on them. We wanted to demonstrate the skills and talents that our friends have. As the event got closer, we walked throughout downtown with invitations to hand out to our unhoused friends. We didn't want the invitations to get lost, stolen, or forgotten about, so we waited until a couple of days before the event. We sourced Indigenous-made ribbon, skirts, and shirts for our unhoused relatives to wear at street stories if they wanted. We contacted a professional hairstylist, and she set up shop in our office to provide haircuts and hairstyling for those who wanted to attend the event. We had hygiene supplies available for those who needed it. We wanted as many of our relatives living unhoused at the event as possible. Providing clothing, haircuts, and hygiene may seem strange. However, if people feel unclean or feel unpresentable, they wouldn't want to attend. We wanted this event to be as accessible and welcoming to our friends as possible. We also arranged for transportation to the event, as it was a considerable distance from the core downtown area. These small accommodations created an opportunity for people to be as engaged with the research project as possible. Without them, we wouldn't have the stories and the information. We wanted them to be included and respected throughout every aspect of the project, not just used for information. We wanted our friends to be treated as people, not as research subjects. So here are some of the slides from Street Stories. We have part of the feast, part of the event hall, drum group. What? Oh, it's good now. It looked like it was on the thing. And then in this slide, we have the powwow dancers, the round dance, part of the art show. Okay, now during Street Stories, we announced the projects that Arch would be piloting. We spoke about the people who brought these ideas forward. We worked hard to stay as true to the initial ideas and solutions to identified gaps as we possibly could. The pilot projects that Arch Brandon are currently overseeing are a cultural men's recreation program. This program was brought forward by Indigenous men that wanted to see more positive activities and more access to their culture. We sourced countless Indigenous-made items such as language books and activities, traditional lacrosse sets, moccasin game sets, Indigenous sky-gazing activities and a telescope, snowshoes, binoculars for bird watching, and a big drum for the men to learn drumming and singing together. We have a cell phone project. Many of our interviewees spoke about barriers due to a lack of a phone. People were missing out on apartment viewings and important appointments because they wouldn't receive messages in time. We launched the cell phone project to try to eliminate this barrier. We distributed 20 flip phones with a month's worth of minutes to unhoused individuals to see if this helps people access services. We also have a foster care card program. This program is small. We had created cards to encourage more Indigenous people to apply to be foster parents, customary, or kinship carers. Some of our interviewees felt unsafe in their designated foster homes and had eventually found their own placements that felt safer. We launched Word on the Street. Some of our friends talked about literacy issues downtown. They pointed out that a lot of programs and services are shared amongst the houseless community through word of mouth, which creates problems with accuracy about programming. Unhoused people that were not from Brandon talked about difficulty in learning about different resources. Word on the Street is a downtown news show that is updated every week or two. We share toxic drug alerts, changes in service hours, upcoming community events, and service events. We place TV screens at locations our unhoused friends frequent to make it accessible. We are planning on delivering a cannabis harm reduction information session. Some of our interviewees indicated that cannabis helped reduce the use of street drugs. We will be presenting a literature review and our interviewees' teachings and what types of medical cannabis are available through provincial programs. We also oversee a fire safety project. Many of our interviewees had lost their homes to fires, which resulted in them living unhoused. To date, we have conducted harm reduction-based fire safety events to try and reduce the number of house fires and encampment fires. Our biggest project to date is Chelsea's Safe House. This is an MMIWG2S-based home for women at elevated risk. Many women that we interviewed spoke about the need for a safe space for Indigenous women. They spoke about wanting to craft together and to eat together. They spoke about the need for somewhere to shower, store their belongings, and have support from others. This home is named after one of the first women we interviewed who spoke extensively about the need for a space like this. Unfortunately, she passed away a couple of months after we interviewed her. Our final project is a corrections project. Many people we spoke with identified gaps in service while in custody. Many were released with no form of identification or proper release plan at all. This project was created to try and alleviate some of these gaps. This project is very new and still in its preliminary stages. It is important to note again that all of these projects were ideas that were brought forward from our friends that were living unhoused. They shared their stories, their knowledge, and their wisdom in order to make each of these projects a reality. Collecting Indigenous knowledge is complex. It requires care, compassion, and understanding. Indigenous knowledge is not meant to stay in a report. Indigenous knowledge is meant to be shared and to be experienced. Miigwech.
That was a great presentation. And now we're going to present the data-driven approach that we have taken at the Manitoba Métis Federation Rapid Service, and our minister will start off.
Thanks, Mehraz. Can everyone hear me okay back there? It's good. Sometimes the microphones are close talking microphones and sometimes they're not. Darian, right? Yeah, good job. I actually live in Brandon as well, so I know all the hard work that you guys are doing, and we also have a program that we're helping deliver as well in the city of Brandon. But I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that we're doing as the Manitoba Métis Federation. First of all, I'll introduce myself. My name is Will Goodon, Minister of Housing and Property Management for the Manitoba Métis Federation. We're the Métis government in Manitoba, but we also have citizens beyond those borders. I won't get into it too much, but we, represent, the birthplace of the historic Métis Nation. And it's not the place or time to talk about identity issues, but one of the things I think is important for us to understand is sort of a bit of a background. Mehraz is gonna help me with some of the more detailed parts of the data collection that we have undertaken, where we are, some of the challenges that we faced, and where we're going to try to move forward. But I think it's also important to have an understanding, like we've been hearing a lot from folks throughout this week. And this is just an amazing conference. There's so many people here. One of the things I noticed is, and I think has to do with the work that you all do. There's so many nice people here, I think, and it's because you care. I'm just walking around, and there's maybe a couple of grumpy people, but just maybe early in the morning. But most of everybody's like, hey, how you doing? Good morning, and a nod. And obviously we're here to talk to each other and learn from each other. But that's one thing I did want to take notice of. Of course, thanking our elders, those who opened up the conference yesterday in a good way. Obviously as well, thanking our veterans, in particular Indigenous veterans. The Indigenous Veterans Day, Remembrance Day is coming up in not too long a time here, and I like to reflect on those contributions and the leadership that those ancestors, those elders who are mostly gone now, have had on the work that they've done to try to rebuild our nations, and I think it's so important to remember that. I do have an awesome team here today. Mehraz is going to be helping out here with the presentation in a little bit here, but we also have Debo and Josh over there. They have been just fantastic, and they're the ones who are doing the work, right off the street level, working with the clients, lifting them up and holding them up when there's a stumble. So I just want to say thank you very much for that. So just a little bit about who we are, the Historic Métis Nation. No, we're going to go back. Where are we? Yeah. Oh, we're there. Oh, okay. Well, I'm looking at the slide here. I'm looking at the wrong slide. Who we are. So the Historic Métis Nation is primarily Western Canada. You've heard of the term Riel's people. You've obviously heard of Louis Riel and Gabriel Dumont and some of the other leaders that we've had in the past who had to struggle. Part of the struggle was about homes, was about housing. And, when Riel was negotiating our entry into Confederation, land was a big issue, to protect the land that we had, the homes that we had, but also to set the stage for the next generation, the land set aside for the children. And as we know, some of you may know that Canada did not fulfill that obligation. They just decided not to do it after they were able to send troops to the Red River. Then they had control. They didn't have to do anything anymore. So we finally were able to set that straight a few years ago. We had a Supreme Court ruling saying that Canada had to do its duty, do its obligation. But going back to houses, that's part of what happened. When the Reign of Terror happened, when the military moved into Red River and beyond, women were raped, men were murdered, drowned in the river, our houses were burnt down, or our houses were simply moved into by other people. Homes and housing has been an issue for our nation since we joined Canada. And after that diaspora happened, where we had to flee from our home in Red River, there was places where we had to live. We had to find some place to live, to squat. In the West, the land is all cordoned off by section, township, and range, so it's square miles. And there's, in between those farm lands, there's something called road allowances, and that's owned by the government. The only place that we had to live was on those road allowances. We squatted. We were, one of the names we were actually known as was the road allowance people. And we just built houses with whatever we had. Logs, sod roofs. My dad grew up in a log house with a sod roof and a dirt floor. And, when it rained, they had every pot and cup and bowl was set out to catch the rain. And him and his little sister would sleep under the bed because that's the only dry spot. Not saying that other people didn't have it as bad, but those are the conditions that just one generation ago, our people suffered through. When we, as I said, the reason I brought up the veterans is once World War II happened, and World War I, our citizens, our Métis people, they served. Even though Canada had gone to war against them in 1885, took their land, both in what's now Manitoba and what's now Saskatchewan, we still served our country. We still went overseas. And World War II, when we come back, it was a sort of a neat thing that happened, is that our young men and women who went over and served learned leadership skills coming back, and now began to organize. And they began to see that beyond what was in their own villages, that other people didn't live like they did. Their houses weren't that way. And they began to organize. Housing became such an important issue, throughout the 40s, 50s, 60s. And then when the MMF was officially started in 1967, housing was the most important issue. And it still is to this day. One of the reasons, I try to set the stage for why it's so important for us to understand through data. It's a really important thing that is being done when there's studies that happen, when we have an understanding of who is being affected, when we know who's on the street, when we know where they are. It's so important, but it's also important to know where we came from, so that we can know who we're talking about, who we're working with, so that we can have those supports that are culturally appropriate. That is incredibly important. If you're talking to somebody whose spirituality is not the same as yours, it's something I think you have to take into account. Their family of origin, what happened there. Obviously, mental health and addictions and those other things we've talked about, and we know those factors as well. But for us, we need to be involved. And we say this about every program, whether it's housing, whether it's education, whether it's employment and training, economic development. We know our people better than anybody else. And that's why we're able to have those successes that we've had. Our Métis government has done leaps and bounds in the last 25, 30 years. It's just absolutely amazing. I would take credit for it, but it's my president is not in the room, maybe he's listening. I don't know. No, it's just it's been a team effort, and I just feel fortunate to be able to do it in a very small way. When we started doing housing back in 2018 was when we first, believe it or not, 2018 was the first time we had Métis-specific housing money. Over 150 years, almost 150 years at that time, And that's when we started to have money to repair, to build some homes in our communities. And we are doing an amazing job, but the need is so much higher. But we also saw the need because, and I know you know all this, because when you walk outside, you just see what's happening. You see the people who are falling through the cracks. And I felt that. I saw that. It was, I've always felt that for me personally, and I grew up in a nice home. My dad he grew up in a log shack, but he was a smart businessman, did very well, and we had everything we needed. But when we talk about mental health and addictions, it isn't just the folks you see on the street. It's just a lot of us are hiding some of that sometimes. And for me, I've always felt that I was one really stupid decision away from being on the street as well. And I always remind myself of that because it could happen to anybody. It could happen to anybody in this room. It could happen to you and me. And it's something I felt for a very long time. And reminding myself so that I can do the best I can, fight for those who can't fight for themselves, try to get funding from as many different sources as possible, convince decision makers to do the right thing. And in 2021, we were able to find funding pieced together from different levels of government to open up Free Métis. Free Métis is a Michif word, that's our language, and it means fresh beginnings. It's right on Main Street in Winnipeg. And we have 22 units there. Oh, there we go. 20 units, and they're all full. We keep a couple open for very emergency cases, but it's I've stayed there. I figured why if we're going to be housing people who are in need, who we're trying to help, I need to know what it's like in there. I did make one suggestion that their pillows were too thin. So I had them go out and buy new pillows. But other than that, it's clean, it's comfortable, it's accessible, and the wraparound services that we have in there is something we're always building on, but it's something that I think shows community. And I think that's one of the things that we've been hearing, at least I've been hearing all week here, is about that sense of community and how that, the response to that is so much more than just the numbers, just the formulaic stuff, which is important. And we're talking about data and we're talking about numbers here, and those are important to help us make decisions. But it's also important to understand the human side of the equation. And I think, Mehraz, when he asked a question earlier this morning about that, the quantitative versus the qualitative side of the research, those are both important. But it's also, we have to understand, each of them and not in isolation. One of the things that we have challenges with was our data collection. We are an Indigenous government, and we are learning how to do that. We've operated in that way in some capacity for many years now, but we're still taking some steps and sometimes finding some challenges. And one of them being data sovereignty, which Mehraz is going to talk about here in a little bit, is who owns the data, who then can use the data. But then it's a double-edged sword as well. So you've got, there's people, service groups and organizations that need the data so that if somebody is going from one place to another, that there's a record and an understanding of what they've been able to access and what their needs are. But at the same time, as an Indigenous government representing an Indigenous nation, we need to protect that as well. That is something that hasn't happened in a lot of cases throughout colonial history. So, that is a bit of a challenge. Now we are working to find a solution with that. We have developed our own processes, but we also want to have partnerships with groups like HIFIS so that there can be the sharing of data. And I think I'm going to stop there. I know I've probably spoken too much and I've used up all of Mehraz's time, but we want to have some time for questions and answers as well. But I wanted to set that stage so that you can all understand who we are, because. And I'll just say it here, because there's a lot of misunderstanding about our nation, about who we are as a nation, who we are as a people. We're not mixed. I'm Métis because I have Métis ancestors, not because I have a long-lost Indigenous or First Nations ancestor. We have our own language, we have our own customs, we have our own food, we have our own clothing, we have our own music, dance, kinship, political cooperation, whether it was through battles or negotiations or treaties. We are a distinct people, and that is not always apparent in today's world, and the identity issue is really important. But I wanted to talk about who we were, where we came from, so that you can see why there are challenges when we are working with things like data sovereignty. Anyways, I'll introduce Mehraz Sarker. He's our he's actually leaving my housing department, and I'm mad at him. But he's an amazing young fellow, and he's going to take us through the rest of the presentation. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister Goodon. I just also wanted to mention we just finished our presentation in Brandon, Manfa Housing Conference, and Minister won the Spirit of Leadership Award, and that's a award for contributing to nonprofit housing a lot. So round of applause for him. So obviously, Minister mentioned about the Frimachi, and through Frimachi, we provide like housing first support, and then reconnection to the culture. Obviously, that's an important part, and for that we do a lot of access to elders, knowledge holdings, and really emphasizing on family reunification. And obviously, we also do coordinated access. So we do housing first, but we also do it with other service providers there. And as Minister mentions, data governance and self-governance and data sovereignty is pretty important for us. So what we have done here, we have developed a separate data management system for Frimachi, so that we can collect data in a way that is more appropriate and also maintains the sovereignty and ownership of data. So what we have done is we have developed a platform, and it is important to mention the platform was developed by ID Fusion, and that is Métis-owned organizations, and that means like we have developed the data for the people, Métis people, and with the Métis people. So the system actually, and this is a key question. So why you wouldn't have using the HIFIS or other system? Obviously, one answer is data sovereignty, but also it allows us to connect with the central registry system. So MMF has their own central registry system where we have every citizen's information, and every citizen have their V number, citizenship card. So we could connect that our management system with that directly, so that if we want to search someone, we can find them right away. And obviously it was co-designed by CRO, our central registry system. Division that I've mentioned, Métis-owned contractor. And obviously it protects sensitive information about Métis individuals. And again, I'm gonna go in details on that, but it also collects culturally appropriate details from every individual. So we really wanted to avoid the dependency on the third-party system that collects information on our citizen. And we're still working on to be open with HIFIS in terms of collaboration, like Minister said, but that collaboration needs to happen maintaining that sovereignty and ownership piece. So let's explore the Data Hub. Just before exploring, I just wanted to share a very special story of Keith Young, and I call that guy a hope. He was one of the participants of Frimachi. So Frimachi is a transitional housing. People who have never been housed or homeless, they come here, stay in Frimachi, and the caseworkers and case managers help them grow into their full potential so that they can transition into a permanent housing and possibly into employment and more. So Keith has begun his journey. He moved to Mexico because he was unable to afford high rent costs in British Columbia. So upon returning, he faced depression, and obviously he was homeless, which actually sparked his desire to make a positive change. So this is something very inspiring from Keith. He traveled by bike for 30 days from BC to Manitoba, and coming near to the Tim Hortons on St. Mary Avenue in Winnipeg while seeking support from local organizations. And that's when he actually came in contact with us. So this experience deepened his understanding of the struggles faced by homelessness individual and strengthened his commitment to help those who are in crisis. So currently, Keith he has done his nursing study, and now he wanted to be employed, but now he opened his own moving business. It's called Muddy Water Movers. And this guy is really inspiring, and he is super passionate about helping others. And he does that from his profit of that business. Like 50% of his profit goes in terms of helping others. And he has a vision of creating a new nonprofit organization. I'll show a quote from his website. So it says, "Our mission is to help solve the problem with homelessness crisis our city is facing. Just ask me, it's personal." So he's super into helping others in terms, and I feel he's one of the greatest hope story for everyone who's on the street. Now, I wanted him to be here and speak on behalf of him and his experience. Unfortunately, he wasn't selected for the bursary, and obviously he didn't want to come with the support of funding him. But he said he's going to see this presentation, and there's the camera. Keith, if you're looking at it, we are all proud of him. Okay, now let's go to our data management system. So obviously we have the client in tech, but it is pretty basic, just like a HIFIS. But the main thing is we can actually we separate the client intake based on whether they're Red River citizen or non-citizen. So if they're a citizen, it gets instantly connected to CRO, and we collect the basic information from CRO. But if that's non-citizen, then we have to add that additional information in place and then evaluate the eligibility for Frimachi. So Frimachi is a 20 unit, and we prefer the Métis citizens first, but obviously we don't turn away anyone. So if the one unit is empty and there's someone who's knocking at the door and they need help, we obviously gonna help them in terms of. So we add additional care information, and then we set the priority and assigning care manager and care worker. And this is how it looks like in terms of our data process. So we obviously, if someone is citizen, we can write, search their name, and that CRO is instantly connected, and we can see their information there. And if we select someone, if we can also see the citizen VIN number, and then the basic information obviously will be always there. So this is not an actual citizen, it was a made up name, and that's why not all the information is there. But if it's a non-citizen, then we'll press non-citizen, and then this will bring out the same page, but then we have to fill this up to create the participant. So creating the participant this is not the actual intake process. This is just to create the participation slip to be in our program, and then we can evaluate and then go into details of how we do for the actual intake. So most importantly, we collect particular like participants' culturally appropriate information, and mostly those who were Métis citizens. So obviously, in this collection process, we'll have their citizenship with VIN number. We'll know their home community. MMF has a lot of locals and regional offices, and then we know that regions and locals, and then their particular medical conditions. We can also able to upload their IDs, citizenship card here, and then most importantly, MMF's interdepartmental consent forms and referrals. So we have a lot of departments, and then sometimes what happens is one department send one person to another department so that we can take a multiple advantage of the citizens can take multiple advantages, and that information is vital, that whom they are coming from, and then their consent and everything gets transferred right away. So for the service approach, we have in the data system, I'm going to show the data system right away, but it's a complicated process. So I just wanted to share before that. So let's say we start with the basic needs that includes clothes, food, hygiene, and then we have the cultural and heritage information that we collect or serve in terms of service. Education is one important part, employment, and family. Family reunification is also a very key here. We also provide, the financial services in terms of the need, health and wellness, housing, identification. Obviously, identification is a key for, especially for those who want to become a Métis citizen. Obviously, they have to go through the genealogy test and get a citizenship card. But sometimes people come and say, I self-identify as Métis. I want to get the citizenship card. Get me into the process. So all of and transportation is also pretty important, because a lot of our participants do need transportation in terms of seeing doctors, appointments, getting into places. Sometimes the landlords say, hey, just come to visit our place, and if you can't come in 1 hour, you're not going to get the place. So sometimes that becomes vital. So this is how our service approach would look like. So for, let's say, for a particular person, we would add basic needs, just like I mentioned. We would, add different types of clothes, food, hygiene, and then we can provide details here. And obviously the amount of service we have provided, like if there's any amount associated with that, and we could say whether it's in progress or not. We can say where they're coming from, like different referral out, whether if we referred out to them. And then we can add multiple services. Like let's say this person needs financial assistance as well. Like we can go ahead and we can tick that, and that will bring out another, and we can also add housing as well. So let's say we provide like in need of housing, eviction prevention. So just like that, we will continue to add different information for them. And yeah, and that these information will come up in the dashboard for the worker, caseworker and case manager, so that they can instantly know what's going on with the client and how's everything's going. We can actually, so when we save it, we can actually see, obviously we can add communication as well. So sometimes participants need a specific communication need, say call us any specific time or not. And follow-up is also pretty important. I guess, follow-up is pretty important, because we do a 6-month follow-up, and that way we know that this follow-ups have been done quite well. For some people, we have to do more follow-ups, so we can count that follow-ups into the process. So overall, in this through this data management, we can actually understand how many intakes we have done, where services we have provided, and we can get the breakdowns of that, and obviously different regional participants. This is something important for MMF, so that we know which region is needing more support from us, number of participants, of course, and then caseload of caseworkers. This is something we have been looking for, because sometimes we assign more casework in specific person and less casework. So we want to know what's the caseload, number of follow-ups, like I mentioned, and high priorities. So there's an option in the system that we can choose whether this is a high priority or not. So someone who needs immediate support, we can choose a high priority for them. Referral in and out. These are all the numbers, dollar amount, and non-Métis participant services. So these are all the items that we are going to get the number and details so that we can do analysis of our own service that we provide. So the analysis will look like this. I'm not showing any particular analysis, but the management system will produce the information like this so that we know the details right away. One of the example is like, let's say how many participants we have served in different region that I have mentioned. Another example is, so in compared to last fiscal year, obviously our need for the service and the demand for the service has increased, but we can see the trend that in the transportation sector, it has increased significantly. And transportation sector means like, participants needing to have an appointment or needing our car. So through that data analytics, we decided and made a policy implement that we would buy a second car. We already have a car that provides, but looking at the demand, we decided that we're gonna buy a new car, but we also developed a policy and procedure to use gas cards. So previously we had to, use our personal money and then get reimbursed, but then looking at the demand and need, we came up with that policy. Another example is, obviously financial need is pretty common that increases every time, and obviously that's why this financial need is actually means like participants needing their deposit money or helping them with the hydro bill or helping them with buying groceries, startup kits, stuff like that. So that demand obviously increased and we allocated more budget on that. This data management and everything didn't come very smoothly. We obviously faced a lot of challenges. So, for example, staff and stakeholder face challenges in the new system. So we previously, like I said, like Minister said, we didn't use HIFES, so we previously used the Excel chart, and it was pretty hard for caseworkers to move from Excel chart to a new system. Obviously, incomplete, outdated, inaccurate data. Migration was a challenge for that. And then ensuring the new system complies with the privacy and regulation, safeguarding the sensitivity of the data is also a challenge. And obviously it came with a high implementation cost. And one of the key challenges that I've mentioned previously, like coordinating of data sharing protocol between different organizations, especially with HIFES, we're still working on it, but it's still one of our challenges. How we go around these challenges was like, obviously we provided trainings to the different user levels. We engaged our staff in an early system so that we can gather the valuable information and data from them. And we rolled out in different phases. So in small group, we rolled out the draft phase so that caseworkers can try that. And we have obviously implemented role-based access control. So to secure that, ensuring that not everyone has the full access. We have certain persons, for example, program manager gets the full access, the data manager gets the full access. And then data is encrypted in both sides, so ensuring the security, obviously. And obviously, like I mentioned, we are working on developing standardized manner and protocol to collaborate with other organizations and HIFES in a manner so that we can maintain our data sovereignty. That's all from our side. And I guess we have 30 minutes for a question and answer session on is our presentation has been inspiring and for everyone? if that's the case, then I would assume that you would be able to ask question without mic. I don't see any microphone here.
No? Okay. Well, just yell real loud. Just be pretty loud, yeah.
Yeah, just be inspired and loud. So yeah, we're open for question both to Darian and ourselves.
Oh. Oh, there's two.
Go ahead.
Like when you're talking about HIFIS, and so you utilize HIFIS as well? Sorry.
Sorry for the confusion. No, we don't use HIFIS. We have developed our own data management system, but we're looking forward to collaborate with HIFIS. The reason we want to collaborate is that so that there's no repetition of taking data for someone, so that someone goes to, like, let's say Southern Mission or Main Street Project in Winnipeg and gets an intake, and then they know, oh, you're a Métis citizen, so you can go to Frimachi, and they get to the same intake again. So we are trying to avoid that, and that's the key purpose of the collaboration. But we also wanted to maintain that sovereignty and ownership part.
Yeah, so I really appreciate your presentation. It was really informative, especially the concept of data sovereignty. I'm just curious to know, what are the instances where organizations don't have that like, data sovereignty, or like they don't prioritize that? Like, what do they do with that data? Yeah, have there been instances where like essentially like, they use it, or like, yeah, what do they usually do?
I think Minister Goodon will be able to shed some experience on that. You can actually talk over there, yeah, as well.
No, don't. That's an excellent question, and I'm going to have to reach to find an analogy that works in this situation. But I think if we can maybe broaden the scope a little bit to understand about traditional knowledge, maybe that might be a better way of putting it. We've all heard the stories of how pharmaceutical companies have gone to the Amazon and taken traditional knowledge from Indigenous tribes and then used it to make billions and trillions of dollars without any supports to the people whose knowledge that they stole. That's maybe not a perfect example, but I think when you look at data sovereignty in the lens of traditional knowledge, I think that it becomes a little bit more clear. At the same time, maybe closer to the ground level is, how I think there's a hesitancy, especially on our part, as, like I said before, we are known as the road allowance people, but we're also known as the forgotten people, Canada's forgotten people. And, so we have been overlooked for almost our entire existence while Canada has been a nation. And now we're a little hesitant to, give those things that, who's going to use it and what's it going to be used for. There's just a sense of mistrust with, the colonial structures. So I think, that is a big part of it as well, that, we need to be careful. We have seen things that we've developed is just taken away and it's gone. Institutions that we've developed, financial institutions that have just gone and on their own, housing institutions that have gone on their own when we've struggled to build them up, radio stations that we've built and then they're gone. It's just, I guess that sense of mistrust is still there. We're the only nation that Canada went to war against inside its own borders. That's obviously intergenerational and a long time ago, but it's still, I think, something that is almost, is still present underneath the surface a little bit. So it's, one of the things I think, though, that we need to have the message is that we know that the street doesn't care what color you are, right? Or which minority, which displaced people, which who you identify as. The street doesn't care. So we need to work with each other. I had the fortune to go to Houston a few months ago to talk to them about their processes, and collaboration was the number one theme throughout the whole couple of days that we were there. And everybody who collaborated, the different organizations, they all did something really good, but they didn't all do everything really good. So that's how they are able to do and have those successes that they've had. We understand that. And that's why we're moving forward to provide collaboration, to make sure that there is sharing of information, and balance it with our own national issues as a distinct nation. So hopefully that helps a little bit. Thanks.
Go ahead.
You go first, and then you.
So for communities that do currently operate HIFIS, do you have any recommendations or best practices on how to better align with Indigenous data sovereignty, with those with the requirement that we are using HIFIS?
Maybe you can start off.
Yeah, I'll try. I think we need to build those relationships of trust. Like I talked before a little bit about the mistrust, and not all Indigenous governments or service providers feel this way. And I do need to, I think, make a distinction between an Indigenous nation, an Indigenous government, and an Indigenous service provider. There's very, very different things. So I think that for the most part, you're going to find that people want to be that cooperative on the cooperative side. So, but I think building those relationships and the trust, those personal relationships, which is why we all come here, right, to talk to each other. And I know that our folks back in Manitoba, they talk to each other all the time, because you're dealing with the same people sometimes, or you're in the same Chinese restaurant having lunch at the same time. And that's when that personal level of trust comes in. And then you build the organizational trust at the next level, and bring those people along with you. And but yeah, I think just making the effort to reach out, and none of us want to step on the landmines, right? So that's why communication is at the base of everything: your marriage, your children, your work, absolutely everything. So yeah.
I don't know if I might.
You want to?
Yeah,
so Mehraz wants to add.
Yeah, I just want to add a little bit as well. So, just wanted to share. So this last evening, I was talking to someone representing HIFIS. Rebecca, you can correct me if I'm wrong. So one of the things he has mentioned that it was at the beginning, it was a little bit of assumption that no Indigenous organization might have their own data management system. So it was that pre-assumption that actually kind of created a new approach to have a data management for HIFIS. But I guess, and we cannot forget that it took a lot of money to develop this data management. So not a lot of organizations will have that amount of money. And so I think advocating for and with HIFIS to have a policy and protocols that actually respects the sovereignty and ownership of data, I think is the key at this point. I just also wanted to mention that this question and answer session also for both of us, like Darian as well. Yeah, sure.
Hi, I'm Dr. Megan McKenzie, and I'm the lead researcher with the Arch project. And I just want to answer that question from the perspective of the Safe House. So the Safe House that Darian talked about as one of our projects is actually a partnership with the Manitoba Métis Federation in Brandon. And the HIFIS in Brandon has a different history than HIFIS in Winnipeg does. So HIFIS in Brandon, MMF, Manitoba Métis Federation, was one of the founding organizations of HIFIS in Brandon and continues to actively use HIFIS in Brandon, including with the Women's Safe House. And so there's been all kinds of mechanisms that we've put in place, particularly with these really vulnerable women that are accessing the Safe House, in order to ensure that that data is managed in a way that is culturally appropriate and is responsive to their safety needs. So there's the house is part of the shared network of HIFIS in Brandon with all the other agencies in Brandon, and MMF is one of the overseeing on that committee that helps decide what information is released, along with other Indigenous organizations such as Brandon Friendship Centre. There's been lots of work done in terms of protocols and practices to ensure that users are only able to access the information that they need, that there's protocols about if there is a breach, that there's clarity around what type of information is added and how. And there's also been a huge amount of work modifying the HIFIS database in order to meet the needs of agencies, particularly like this Women's Safe House that we're running as a trial project, to ensure that, like when the drop-down menus happen, like for instead of just having caseworker, we have auntie is one of the options. Or for the provision of supplies, a smudging kit or a beading kit is one of the supplies that's counted in it. But there's all kinds of options in terms of recording what their Indigenous status is, depending on what type of Indigenous status they have and the numbers of home communities that go with it. So we've been able to take HIFIS and modify it extensively in these particular situations. And a lot of it we have learned, thankfully, because MMF has run their Housing First in Brandon under this model, and a number of their other houses that they're operating and programs that they've been operating. So they've learned from the ground what was needed in this particular situation in Brandon. So it's a little bit of a different situation that's happening in Winnipeg, but there's absolutely ways to modify and work with HIFIS to ensure you have both that safety and protection that our really vulnerable Indigenous people need, as well as modifying to ensure that the database is reflective of what people's identity is.
And I'll just add that that's obviously always evolving too. So we're learning as we go. So.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, very much so our project. I mean, it's a trial project, right? It's an innovation, and we're trying things and seeing what works and what doesn't and learning and growing from it.
Hi, Erica. Thanks so much for your presentation. This is a little along the same lines in that one of the challenges we're finding collecting data is just having our clients feel comfortable self-disclosing their Indigenous identity. And so I was wondering if you had any suggestions for best practices on how best to even ask people more information about their identities in a way that is culturally sensitive and respectful and is also going to protect their safety as well.
I'll let you talk to this, but I just wanted to Indigenous identity is an incredibly sensitive issue across Canada at the moment. We've seen people who aren't Indigenous, when I'm not talking about homeless, unhoused, we're just talking about regular Canadians who are pretending to be Indigenous in order to get a job, in order to get a grant, that kind of thing. And it's in the news almost every day. There was one just a couple of days ago. And for those, it's the Métis who are always the last one that they will cling to, because then they can say they have a long lost ancestor, they're mixed, therefore they're Métis. And as I explained earlier, that's not who our people are. That's not what our nation is. But at the same time, so you're dealing with people who are extremely vulnerable, who've had trauma, likely, either themselves or intergenerational. Not likely, it's almost 100% that case, right? So, even when I was a kid, but for sure when my dad was a kid, self-identifying as Indigenous was absolutely ridiculous. You don't do that. Like, no, we're not this, we're not that, we're French, because they spoke a little bit of French words in their language. And then you get these vulnerable people today who are, still have that trauma from the past. And how do they, that's something that may need to be not, that's another place where I think trust needs to be built. So you may not get all that information, in that first intake. You might have to work with those people, but also I think to have the ability to communicate with the different communities that are around you. So depending on where you live, you know which Indigenous communities are closest by and which are the ones you mostly see. And I would suggest that it's really important to speak with leadership and folks who are, employed there, who are dealing with similar issues, to ask that question. I know how I would want you to ask in Manitoba if a person was Red River Métis or not, but I may not know how to do that in Nova Scotia with the Mi'kmaq. So I think that is it's an extremely important issue, and today it's a really touchy issue. And I think sometime in the next few years, we are going to get a better understanding of identity, and lock it down, so to speak, more or less. But yeah, I think you're right to be able to approach this question in this way, and to do it in a way that's very sensitive, just how you did it here, but also have those discussions with local leadership as well. And I'm sure you guys have had some experiences too.
I think what you're saying, Will, is so critical about the relationship, because I think that when people feel comfortable and safe, they're willing to disclose all kinds of things that are more vulnerable. And sometimes too, so I just wanted to show this one coloring book that we used during our ARCH interviews. It's a Jackie Travers, who's a well-known Indigenous artist from Manitoba. So by having things around that indicate an agency, whether it's Indigenous staff, whether it's Indigenous cultural items like an Indigenous coloring book, or other signs and indications that this is a safe place to talk and a safe place to disclose, that people are much willing to tell us. And even in our interviews, we had some people that we had been chronically homeless that we interviewed who had not previously disclosed that they were 60 scoops, and that they had been raised as white and have been perceived as white, but that they were actually Indigenous. And so in some of those cases, I think it's, sending out the message, whether it's with the folks that are working there, or the way that the space is decorated, or little things like having Indigenous coloring books to color in. It kind of sends out the message, it's safe to tell us this, that this is not going to be a judgmental space. And we allowed people to self-identify themselves, how they identified. Partially because there's no way we could check, because most people don't have identification that are walking around on the street, some do, but, and also we just wanted people to feel like however they saw themselves, because people's identities are really complex, especially when we had folks who were 60 scoops, or who had been raised by one side of their family and not the other. And so we just allowed them to identify as they saw fit. And just from running the HIFIS database previously, I know that we have had to update it sometimes. Sometimes people have not disclosed, like you're saying, right away, but then after a few meetings, they're like, well, actually, I would like help getting my card,
I'll just add on to that real quickly, that a pan-Indigenous approach is may be easier to do in the beginning, but it's also important to understand that First Nations are not all the same. Mm-hmm. So Anishinaabe is different than Dakota, is different than Cree, different than Mi'kmaq, and they all have different traditions. And the Métis, likewise, are different than all those Indigenous nations as well. Mm-hmm. So, not one size fits all when you're doing Indigenous programming. It gets really complicated, but I just wanted to throw that out there as well, because it's something that we've seen before, where we all get lumped together. I guess I'm conducting here. I think you were first here. Yeah.
it was really interesting and really great that you mentioned that most of the people who were working with you had previously worked like in outreach positions and things like that. That's something we're working on in our community is kind of like, you know, find those people and making sure they're the ones that are doing the work. So I guess it's how did that look? I guess because I feel like as an outreach worker, like if somebody were to say like, hey, can you help me with this research? I'd be like, I would love to, but I don't know what that looks like.
We tell you about the hiring process?
So.
You start by not looking at people's resumes.
This was literally me. I
Yeah.
have zero research background
Yeah.
whatsoever. I am literally right from the trenches. I've worked chronic homelessness. I've worked at homeless shelters. I've worked youth homelessness prevention. So I'm coming straight from the front line. I think what it comes down to, especially when you're trying to work with Indigenous people, you want to target those people that have the lived experience and have the frontline experience, because you can have all the fancy degrees in the world, but at the end of the day, that doesn't mean you're good at working with a specific population. And that's where I really shined, was people knew me, they were familiar with me, they were comfortable with me. I still have people come to the office wanting help. So that's...
And she spoke the right language, understood the right subcultural terminology, so that like when somebody said to her, "My uncle bothered me," she knew what that meant, right? Like, or if they use drug terminology or whatever because of that. And so when I was hiring for this project, none of my researchers are academics. I'm not one of them. But they're all are either Indigenous or have lived experience or frontline experience working with folks.
Or all of the above.
Or all of the above. That's right. And that made it, because you can teach people how to do certain types of documenting skills or how to do certain technical things, but it takes a lifetime to learn how to be culturally competent and culturally aware. It takes a lifetime of making some great decisions like I have myself in order to learn about what happens when things go wrong and what that looks like, what trauma looks like in somebody, so that you can pause when somebody needs to pause, when you can respond with them with what their needs are in that moment, instead of just plunging through a whole list of questions. So I took the things that they came inherently with that are almost impossible to teach and taught the skills that they needed to learn in order to be the researchers. But yeah, so it's a very unusual situation where you have an entire team with only, like I'm the only academic.
How was it to, like, I can't imagine. How was it to, like, learn those skills? Like, was there something you guys did to make it approachable, like, I guess, or?
I mean, it's just a matter of like stepping out of your comfort zone. Like, I'm not one that has presented at very many places. This almost gave me a panic attack. So it's just a matter of, if you're going to grow, you need to just do it. You know, and we're always encouraging our clients, well, just take that step, just take that step. So I just kind of had to case manage myself in my own head in a way.
And remember too, our people that we were interviewing were incredibly gracious with us. Like, they were okay if we got lost what we were supposed to be doing. I couldn't get the tape recorder to work right. And like, and so I think that sometimes we think we have to be perfect to be able to proceed, to go ahead. And sometimes that we just have to let some of that go and just be like, oh, you know what we have is enough. Our community has the wisdom and knowledge we need. We don't need some outsider to come in and tell us how to do things. We just have to trust, both in terms of our folks that we're gathering the knowledge from, but also from our folks that are gathering the knowledge, that we can all learn and grow together and have grace with each other, figuring out. And like, we've messed up these projects lots in different ways, and but they've thrived wonderfully in so many ways as a result too. And that's okay. It doesn't have to be like some textbook thing. And I think we get so nervous that, we need to hire some outside consultant to make something be proper. But that doesn't need to be the case at all.
Our imperfections were our strengths.
Truly.
Because our people saw that we were real. We weren't out there putting on a facade. I'm not out bombing around downtown in a power suit with a clipboard. We're just showing up to work as we are.
Can we just let her answer?
Yeah.
Alex, do you want to say something? Yes.
I want to say something
So
from
this is
the opposite side.
This is Talix from Brandon.
Yeah, I'm lived experience. And I want to say what I'm like working with. I know these two very, very well, Bryn and Darian. And when Darian wanted to interview me, it's so funny. Like this gentleman had said, you know, oh no, we don't reveal our status. We're French. We're something else. And when Darian talked to me, he said, my whole life I've never had status because my father's situation just led that way. And I told Darian that I can't be included because I'm not status, I'm not that. And she said, F that, and Bryn was like, let's get you status. There's papers, we can do the work and I'm in the process of it right now. But just from my side, they made that comfortable. They made me believe that it's okay to be who I am because it doesn't matter what happened before. We're making differences now and we're changing it. And it was their lingo and it was their experience and it was their just personalities and their personability that allowed me to even start believing that it is okay to reveal who I am and start living how I'm supposed to be.
You're gonna get.
That's it.
Also, you may have seen Talix on the screen earlier in some of the pictures because she was one of our wonderful readers who presented the research and our findings at the Street Stories event that we held as well.
Right on. I think we got time for one more. This gentleman here.
I was really struck by doing the surveys and the slide about declaring intention before doing the survey. And then listening to your presentation, we were talking on the tech side and the possibility of collaboration. And my head went to, what the heck does consent look like? Meaning, having in the HIPUS sense of the word, if you're sharing somebody's information, we believe it's going into a system for us by us, but then it's being shared to another system. How do you navigate that outside of the legal realm?
So So I definitely represent because I was involved in the work and I'm a research guy. Yeah, academic, don't throw me out, but so because we focused on like I guess it's a case for every research, like everyone is talking about, the methodology. If someone's focused, the methodology that needs to be objective, and instead of prioritizing people, then that research would not, prioritize people at all. So in our case, we have waited, like we have used Excel spreadsheet, but waited until we have someone who actually is Métis to develop that management system. So because like we deal a lot of people who are in crisis, sometime when they need help, they wouldn't come and say, hey, where's my data going? They would say, ask whatever you want, just give me my housing or whatever the service. So it was our team's responsibility to make sure that their data is safe and their identity is safe. And that's why we wanted to develop that with the Métis owners. Debo is one of our caseworkers. Maybe he can add a little more.
The simple answer to that would be it helps with safety and liability from the participant, which is the client, and the worker and the organization. So it's safe as I didn't share my information with you, and we like, hey, this is the paper. You put it to pen and paper, go line by line. For the worker also, it serves as a guide. Like, if I am dealing with you with housing, I don't need to dig into your file beyond housing. So it's more like I said, it puts everyone in check. So,
And obviously, just to add with that, obviously we have all sort of consent forms in place, and all the caseworkers go with that in details. And the most relieving part is that those consent forms get uploaded into Métis sovereign data system. You want to add or?
Oh, we have 5 minutes left, but I think those are fantastic questions. Can I learned so much just from all the folks who are participating here, and I want to say thank you all on on our behalf and the panel, if I might, all the amazing feedback and interaction, because that's what this conference should be about, right? Not just talking, but listening and communicating. So thank you all.